So again, welcome to Affirming Adults. My name is Deb Pierce. My pronouns are she, they, and I will be your host for the next 90 minutes. Tonight, I would like to welcome teachers, school administrators, support staff, and community partners. Thank you all for being here tonight for this particularly important discussion. Side note, thank you all for pivoting to the very interesting and weird times during COVID in the school system. Thank you for that. In the next hour and a half, we will begin with a land acknowledgement, followed by a moment of silence. Then you'll meet our panelists who are sitting in the green room now, followed by discussions about what it is to be an affirming adult, how we can put our best efforts into that daily practice. We're going to share some lived experience examples of things that have worked and some things that may not have worked in the process. We're going to share resources and we'll wrap up with an open question and answer with you, our viewers. Given the organic nature of the following chat, many feelings and thoughts may arise for you, and we want you to know that we have some resources available that may be sources of support for you or folks that you know. So let's get started. We wish to recognize the Indigenous nations on whose territory we are gathered today. The people of these nations have always been and will always be stewards of this land, and we thank them for the opportunity to be here today. EGAL Canada stands firmly in our solidarity with the Indigenous peoples and survivors of Canada's residential schools. To this end, we would like to take a moment of silence to acknowledge the heinous history, the lives taken, and the ongoing colonial violence and oppression endured by Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. Let us have that moment now. Thank you so much. Okay, for those who may not know about EGAL, the organization putting this on today, here's the mission statement. Also, moving forward after tonight, when all of these questions and resources are swooling and pooling in your head, go to egal.ca, EGALE.ca. Our mission statement is to improve the lives of 2S LGBTQI people in Canada and to enhance the global response to 2S LGBTQI issues. EGAL will achieve this by informing public policy, inspiring cultural change, and promoting human rights and inclusion through research, education, awareness, and legal advocacy. I just want to highlight a few things, the Q&A and chat features for Zoom. Feel free to ask questions that come up for you at any point during this panel. We have reserved some time at the end to address anything that has been submitted. For all other types of discussion, I'd ask you to please use the chat pod. Dennis and Jack are in the background moderating this panel, and they're happy to help. Closed captioning has been enabled, but if you'd like to turn it off, just hover over the bottom of your screen, click the CC button that you find inside the chat button, next to the chat button, and you can disable that. And finally, today's EGAL moderators again are Dennis and Jack, and they'll be here to assist you. Before we bring some panelists on, I want to quickly introduce to you Paula Alphonse. If we can pull you up on screen. You are the French Deb Pierce is really what's happening. You are doing the French panels of Affirming Adults, one for parents and students, and then one for the folks that we have here today. Next Thursday, Paula, is there anything you want to say? If you can unmute yourself, is there anything you want to share with the group about maybe spreading the word about the French-speaking panels upcoming in 1 week today?
So what I would say to anyone listening at this point, we want to ensure that we're representing both communities, French and Anglophones, to get the message, to see what is available in their communities and how they can be affirming adults. So we'll be sharing the links, and feel free to spread it all to the people you know who prefer having this session in French, and maybe some people you don't know that you have on social media that could be interested as well. So thank you very much.
Paula, thank you so much. Thank you in advance for next week, and thanks for joining us tonight. We'll meet tomorrow. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm getting redder and redder as the sun gets closer to me. All right, Paula, you can sit back and enjoy, put your feet up, and let me do the heavy lifting from here on out. Okay, so we're going to bring those panelists on that I was discussing earlier. Shall we do that? Yes, we shall. Okay. So our first, in no particular order of appearance, I would like to introduce Lindsay Kavanaugh, Queen's, UVic, and U of T PhD candidate, educator, and poet. Let's bring you on screen right now. Hi, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm really well. I'm so grateful for you to be here tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. All right, next up, we're going to bring Jordan Applebaum on to the screen from the TDSB Vice Principal of Forest Hill School, working with JK through 8, also a GSA leader and working in trans inclusion. Round of applause for Jordan. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Deb.
Absolutely, my
Great to be
pleasure.
here.
Last but not least, we have a guidance counselor from Tannenbaum Hebrew Academy, and it's Stacia Wall. I feel like I feel like I should be having some sort of musical interlude here. Stacia, thank you very much. Yeah, right? We were doing that at baseball the other night, having a walk-up song. I'm not sure I'm cool enough to have that. So what I want to do before, and we've met previously, and we're going over some things that your lived experience will be able to answer these questions. But just for folks that are joining, you've heard me say probably 7 times already, 2S LGBTQI. Now, that is the acronym that we use, standing for two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex. You don't have to memorize those. It's okay to get them wrong. It's okay to work it out in your time and memorize it. We're going to throw up a gal's glossary of terms for future reference, so you can check that out. You might hear us say BIPOC tonight, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color. You might hear us say non-binary tonight. These are all terms that, you know, I equate it with talking to somebody at a dinner party for an hour and getting along smashingly, and then going, oh my God, I forget their name. It's not too late. You can still learn this stuff, and that's why you're here tonight, right? So don't worry about knowing that or not knowing that. You can do your homework later, but please just sit and enjoy for the next 90 minutes. 75 minutes of Q&A, 15 minutes open of question and answer. Shall we begin? All together now. Lindsay, you're first up. Okay, so I want to ask you, of course, this is called Affirming Adults, right? So if I were to ask you to paraphrase or what exactly it means for you as an affirming adult within scholastic systems, within your teaching, within your learning, what does being an affirming adult in your role and in your life look like?
Yeah, such a great question. I mean, I think for me, it's really about being someone that is willing to listen to other people and to meet them where they are, to kind of witness them in their fullness, being someone that is compassionate, non-judgmental, always willing to learn, you know, be critical but gentle towards myself in the areas that I need to grow and improve. And it's also being kind of confidence in my own identities and giving myself the grace to continuously evolve as the complex person I am, as all of us are.
I love that. So sort of leading with love and leading by your own example, which will send the vibration through that you are a sort of a safer space and affirming adult. I like that. I like that answer a lot. Jordan, to you for the same question, please.
Sure, thanks. So affirming environments are ones that are inclusive for trans, non-binary, gender variant, two-spirit, queer, Black, Indigenous, Asian, and racialized youth. And what that might look like is an educated, welcoming space for everyone, accepting of all identities, acknowledgement of intersectionality, of course, and the importance of pronouns, correct names and pronunciation of the names that people prefer to be called by and the names that they want, and showing the human rights statement up on walls so that people know that they're protected by that. Could be a progress flag, as you have behind you there, Deb. And it's amazing and very inclusive. And there's many other flags that can be put up as well, Two-Spirit flag or intersex flag. Any of the rainbow flags are really create an inclusive space. And then posters on the walls of role models, queer and Black and Indigenous, Asian, racialized role models are always really nice. And culturally relevant, responsive pedagogy throughout the curriculum. And if you have a GSA at your school, that's amazing. Gay Straight Alliance, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, and Young Black Leaders Group or Muslim Leaders Group. And these groups can work together as well to create inclusive environments. And also washrooms, if you have all gender washrooms, and making sure that your policies are protecting all your students and all your communities, all your people. So yeah, safety being most important.
I'm loving the incredibly all-encompassing response. So you, Jordan, if I were to paraphrase that, as an affirming adult, you don't really see a differentiation between your lived experience and your work, right? So you went right from how you vibrate as a community member, right into what you're doing in your school environment, which we are going to do a deeper dive, believe it or not, into all of those. So I love that. I love that crossover, that there's no, you can't even slip a blade of grass through how you lead as an affirming adult and what you do for a living. So for sure, your chosen profession, or the profession that chose you, is a good fit. And finally, working in guidance, how you navigate those waters in allyship, Stacia, within your work environment and as an affirming adult in general.
I mean, for me, I work towards building a relationship of trust, of open communication. I have an open door policy, non-judgmental. I mean, really, I work very hard to make sure that students know they have a safe place to go, that when they walk into my office, it's non-judgmental, that they're important as an individual and they're important as a community member, as part of our school. I think it's really important sometimes to just listen. I do a lot of listening. I don't pretend to have all the answers. And I certainly am open to learning from my students. I think it's really important when it comes to inclusivity, just to understand what different youth's needs are and what makes them feel safe, what makes them feel included, just their emotional needs, their physical needs. So a big part of my role as a guidance counselor for all my students really is to let them know that it's a safe place to come, and that no question or need is too small, too great, and they just, like I said, if they look at me as an affirming adult, then I feel like I'm doing my job.
And just going through again, starting with Lindsay. So we've obviously underscored the importance of an affirming adult role. We're going to get into how you can gain the tools to become that human in your life and in your work. Lindsay, Jordan, and Stacia, maybe I'll leave it up to you to unmute in order or whatever. Can you demonstrate to us how working as an affirming adult has actually come to fruition, where there's been a safer space that you've created, where you can share maybe a lived experience moment or two or three, or I'm sure there's more than one, but I guess the first to pop out, which I can only imagine is incredibly rewarding when somebody entrusts you. Without breaking confidences and names. Obviously, disclosure, obviously we're not going to disclose that.
Yeah, of course. I'll go first, as I think they're thinking up a few different scenarios there. I was at a school where I found out that there was a student who was being bullied at a former school because they were gay. And we didn't actually have a GSA at our school at the time, a Gay Straight Alliance or a Equal Rights Gender and Sexuality Alliance. And so I put an announcement on the announcements and just said, anyone who wants to join the GSA, come join us. And of course, the student who had spoken to me about being bullied was the first one, jumped in and said, yeah, I'd like to join. So I wrote the name down. And then next week came, same student showed up and is there anyone else? No, nobody else. So we were both sitting there. Okay, it's just us. And then the next week, a couple more people came, and a few weeks later, we had about 10 people, which was a small number, but enough to do some advocacy work at the school. And it just made such a huge difference in these students' lives. Like, we had students who were we thought they were shy students, and they were disengaged and just not really involved, not talking in class. And really, honestly, they seemed like just shy students. But after they joined GSA, started getting involved, doing all these incredible things, doing bake sales and raising money for the school, and making buttons which were like had pride flags on them. These students were like happy, they were jumping around, they were talking, they were involved. Like, it made such a huge difference just to have support and like have each other. And it was just incredible to see that transformation.
That's fantastic. We do have a resource that we can put up for virtual GSAs and GSAs. We'll put that in the chat for folks to take a look at. GSAs didn't exist for me in high school. The trajectory of my life, I'm not giving you a woe is me moment, but like, I don't even know what I would have done with that if I would have even gone to it. Maybe when there was strength in numbers, I may have pursued that. So really, the folks that joined that, Jordan, you changed the trajectory of that. And it's interesting, you know, the disengagement or the, you know, the broody, kids that are at school. It's probably just because it's like, I don't wanna, I'm not comfortable.
Exactly.
Don't
feel included, don't feel welcome, don't feel wanted. And maybe
right.
a lot of, like, as you were saying, like, I didn't have GSAs when I was growing up either, and there was a lot of homophobia, like internalized homophobia and transphobia, and I couldn't be myself. And it wasn't until much later, when we have role models in the media and it feels safe and comfortable, that we can be ourselves. So
That's right, creating safer spaces.
mhm.
Build it, and they will make
They will come.
baked goods. Yes. Lindsay, Stacia, any lived experience? No pressure to do so, but I find it, when we're speaking with educators and guidance counselors and teachers and support staff and school staff, I feel like they're probably, put it in the chat if you want to add to it. Lindsay, I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, I mean, I love that Jordan was sharing about kind of GSA stories, but I too was, there were GSAs, but I was way too nervous trying to figure out things about myself. And, I think for my own experience teaching, my last kind of full year of teaching before I decided to go do grad school, I taught in a remote community, and there wasn't really capacity to have a GSA. There wasn't a lot of kind of administrative support for that. But I do remember sort of having students in my class where, through various conversations, through sharing, I'm queer, this is my partner, just the ways that I would talk about different things, there were more and more students that would just sort of linger. They just kind of wanted to chat. They wanted to hang. They wanted to be near. And then over time, they would slip in a little something about themselves, and I'd be like, okay. And I think to one student in particular, that it was really powerful, because it was through actually building sort of this relationship of trust that they really were able to continue, I think, coming to school, because they really struggled with attendance. So I think, what Stacia was sharing about building those trusting relationships at the beginning is so key, because sometimes you do have the infrastructure and the support, but sometimes you don't. And so how do you kind of create those environments? And sometimes it's just like one-to-one personal relationships where people see you as someone that they can share things about themselves.
And I am going to circle back because of a conversation we had in a pre-interview, Lindsay, about curriculum. We're going to circle back to that in a little bit, and feeling maybe more supported, or what we can do as a community of school invested folks, how we can change that or bring that to light. Stacia, anything come out to you? Oh, see what I did there? Come out to you? That was not even a thing. I didn't even mean to, as you were.
So for me, I think what's been most impactful in my role is actually being invited into the journey of students who are either kind of, discovering their own sexuality, or whether they're going through transition. It's that to me has probably been the most impactful, and kind of opening my eyes and expanding my own personal education on how to be a better affirming adult. That these families have trusted me, or these students have trusted me. That to me is a huge honor. And that has allowed my own personal growth and understanding of the 2S LGBTQI community. So as those relationships, like, thank you, Lindsay, for saying it, it's all steeped in trust for me, with all of my students, quite honestly. And that's, I treat my students the way I would want my own children treated, regardless of how they identify. So that has probably been the most impactful thing for me as an educator, as a guidance counselor. And I think in turn, what has happened is that it has shown me that this dialogue needs to be more common in my school. I'm in a very kind of traditional religious-based curriculum school. And as I start to learn more, and my colleagues start to learn more, we start to kind of expand our knowledge and expand the conversation around how important it is as adults to offer, that support and that safe space, and to, just open our minds a lot more. So that's for me really been the biggest part of my own personal education.
And when you throw religion into this, there tends to be a bit of a prickliness around it, right? So like, are there folks that are watching now that are potentially part of the Catholic school system that maybe they can't throw up a pride flag, or they shouldn't throw up a pride flag? Not my words. I mean, I was on the marathon city council meeting about putting up a bloody pride flag. You know what I mean? So when religion is involved, there's a whole sort of different ball of wax, can of worms, something.
Yeah, definitely is.
Yeah.
So many different views within any religion, not just the one that is at my school. So I think at the end of the day, there's going to be teachings, but now I think there's more conversation about the importance of our community, and really kind of focusing on the rights of our students, however they identify. I think the religion it's there, and but now the conversation is building, which is an incredible thing for our school. That's really kind of been very black and white. And now we have just kind of opened the dialogue around how to better support our 2S LGBTQI students.
So it does beg the question, we do have somebody commenting, we've got a flag now in the atrium of our Catholic school. I can't wait to see the kids' reaction. Hopefully it'll be positive, or at least respectful. Yep, that's a start. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And folks, keep your comments and questions coming. We'll get to them at the end for sure. Stacia, we didn't talk about this in the pre-interview, but I have a question for you. And if you don't want to answer it, that's fine. If other folks can jump in, that's fine. When I think about a role of a guidance counselor in, say, a Hebrew school, in, say, a Catholic school, do those guidance counselings have to lead with a religious-based response? Or are you a guidance counselor in a religious school? Do you know what I'm getting to? You know what?
Yes.
Do you understand that question? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think the basis of really any religion is, to be a good person. And I wouldn't say. I mean, I didn't grow up in a very religious community or upbringing or education myself. So for me, I'm an educator that works in a religious school. I think I lead by my own kind of morals and values that happen to, coincide with a lot of the religion. But at the same time, I come to the table with an openness, an open mind, which might not happen in all, religious settings.
Which is what brings you to this panel tonight, Stacia. Thank you. And for the folks that are in those positions, something to learn from, something to stay within. Nobody wants to, I shouldn't finish that sentence. I like to rock the boat. Forget that. I'm not going to finish that sentence. Okay, so we're talking about people coming out, feeling safer if you're leading with love by examples in your workplaces and in your lives. people will feel sort of safer in that. So it brings me to the topic of disclosure. So can you explain in order, Lindsay, Jordan, Stacia, can you explain what strategies you've implemented to the youth that you're supporting so that they can still feel that they have full control over the information they're sharing with you about their identities, so that I guess that's sort of instilling even more of a safer space to come out and to be an affirming adult, Lindsay?
Yeah, definitely. I know for me, when I was teaching, I liked to start off like each class at the beginning of the term with a sort of survey where I would ask students the name that they wanted me to refer to them as, pronouns, and I would also ask them, are you comfortable with me using these names and pronouns in front of the class? Are you comfortable with me using these when referring to, in conversations with potential parents, guardians, caregivers? And I think, I remember actually a few students coming up to me afterwards and being like, thank you for asking that. I don't think a teacher has ever asked me that before. So I think that was one way of sort of signaling to students that I am considering those things. But yeah, that's kind of the one example in terms of being proactive. I think when students are having conversations and might disclose certain things, that's another instance where I would ask them, how can I support you in this? Who do you feel comfortable knowing this information? Is this just for my ears? If this is something about their identities that's not, putting themselves in danger in any ways, if it's just like their gender identity expression, information about their sexuality. So yeah.
That's beautiful that you start your classes like that. I can imagine that a lot of folks are like, no one's ever done that before. So that's something for the support staff and teachers watching now. But what a great way to start, as we're sort of a month out for back to in-class learning, which we'll cover in our next topic. What a great way to lead a classroom. Jordan, how do you ensure that folks are feeling safe and secure in the personal information that they're disclosing to you?
Yeah, so I usually ask them if somebody tells me that they're part of the two-spirit, lesbian, gay, pansexual, trans, queer, intersex, asexual community. And if they're telling me that, then I'll ask them, are you out to your friends? Like, is it okay if I share this information with other people? Is it okay for other people to know, whether it's parents or teachers? Like, just as Lindsay was saying, it's such an important thing. And I know some teachers and admin even get, they have this misconception that if a student has told them that they are required to tell parents, and because it's their child, but that's actually a safety concern. And I've told admin, you can't actually, unless the student wants you to, it's their information to share. And that might be, this student might end up becoming homeless, or you don't know what they might injure at home. And hopefully it's a safe place and it's an accepting space, but we don't know. So yeah, just making sure that I'm clear with that student and they're clear with me of who they're out to and who they're comfortable with being out to, and to let me know if that changes. Because for me, like, I'm trans and I'm out to my school, I'm out in most spaces, but there's definitely spaces where I don't feel comfortable being out. And if somebody outed me, I'd be pretty worried for my safety. So yeah, it's really important for our students to know that. And yeah, I just don't share anyone's information. Oh, but the other important thing that I do tell students and make sure that staff and students are aware is that a GSA it's open for anyone, that you don't have to be part of the queer community, that you can be an ally and you can join. And that way someone doesn't have to be out, and they don't have to feel like, oh, I have to be queer in order to join this. They can join just as an ally. And there's some students who want to join because they might have family members or friends who are in the GSA, or friends who are in the GSA, or family members who are queer. So I make sure that everyone's aware of that so that they can feel comfortable.
I always slip right over for the Gay Straight Alliance. I always forget about the straight people in the Alliance, but allyship is such a huge part of our, our community's development. Yeah,
exactly.
that's amazing. Yeah, and it does sort of mix it up and make it a safer space and keeps maybe folks guessing. So guidance counseling, everything is incredibly confidential. So how do you sort of blanket that for showing that you're an affirming adult to us LGBTQI folks?
For me, I take the lead of the student and their family, and whatever they're comfortable with, whatever they would like me to share is what I work with. I mean, for me, it's a partnership. They're with me for 4 years. I want their high school experience to be a positive one. And I'm only going to know what that looks like, what that means to them, if there's an open line of communication and they share with me. So for me, I take their lead. I ask questions. I make sure that they are comfortable with whatever information they would like for me to share with the staff, with the school. At the end of the day, I don't do anything. I draft things and send that to my student to look at before it's made public, because I could make mistakes. I wouldn't want that to make them feel uncomfortable. So it's all about what they want, what they're comfortable with, and that's where I go from.
And thank you, Stacia. And, as affirming adults, we had a new discussion and we included parents and students in this particular discussion. And it harkened back to something that I've been dealing with the last 4 weeks personally, where not one, but two families have come to me where they have had lived experiences in the community themselves and are straight identified now, have two children, and have always been affirming and have always been leading with affirmations around, a lot of different folks. And their child still came to them with some suicidal ideologies. And most recently, an affirming family with a little child, an 8-year-old, I want to say, maybe older, and not feeling at all comfortable. So what that I want to ask you as professionals, we think about, the parents and affirming adults and guardians and folks that are in the school communities being supportive, but then we're like, but wait, what about the mental health of these folks, right? And so how do we support, I know this is like, it's on the same track, but how do we support those folks to know that that's okay after letting them know that we're a safe space? How do we provide potential mental health supports for those folks? Starting with you, Lindsay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was like listening to you and kind of getting absorbed in that story too, thinking of that child. But I feel that sort of, it makes me think a little bit of, there's this theory called like minority stress theory. And in some of the research, I know I've been looking at doing like participatory action research, which is all about centering the agency of people like youth and educators. And there's actually some research that supports the ways that when people have opportunities to sort of like resist and push back and center on, think about resistance, it can be actually better for mental health, because they start seeing themselves as like an agent, I think, of change and as part of a community that's doing something positive. Because I think a lot of the narrative and rhetoric around 2S LGBTQI people, it is a lot to do with suffering. And so I think when we're sort of steeped in that, and I think about my own self and how I didn't have particular role models and I didn't see myself in different ways, and how lonely I felt trying to find community, having a space where someone could say, you can come over here and sort of like Jordan said, you don't have to know who you are, but like, here's an opportunity where you could support other people. And maybe you're supporting people in your community, maybe you're part of this community, who knows? But it could be a way of sort of building that sense of agency, and giving a chance for people to feel like they're leaders. Because I think we all want to feel capable of, or most of us want to feel capable of doing things that are helping other people. But yeah, again, my background isn't in mental health, but I think that's sort of where my intuition is telling me something that would be helpful. And at least it was for me.
Yes, I like the concept of empowerment and having sort of the autonomy to be. Jordan, is there anything that you can, you know, if you know that maybe the
Sure.
parents are super woke and they're, you know,
Mhm.
their child is really, really struggling. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's great if their parents are supportive and there for them. That's amazing. And just as Lindsay was saying, like it's really important that people can feel like they can be a leader and be an ally and advocate. And if there's a student who's feeling, or a child who's still feeling really down, then it could be maybe they know their parents are supportive, but maybe they're scared that friends aren't or other people aren't. And if people aren't saying anything and all they're seeing in the media, like the media is changing, but it's still, there's not a lot of role models out there in terms of trans role models, in terms of non-binary and gender variant role models. And so if all they're hearing is Trans Day of Remembrance and people being killed, then it's really scary. And so I think making sure that they have resources, they have places to go where there's other kids their age who are out, other people who are supportive, making sure that they are in communities and they see that not only in their school is the school supportive and there's announcements that are very supportive of queer communities, but also outside in the world that they can get involved with 519 or youth groups and see that they're accepted and that there is so much pride and so much joy and so many amazing things about being queer. I remember my mom when I first came out, she was so sad and she was like, "I just want you to be happy." And I'm like, "I am happy. I actually just want you to accept me." But she thought that it meant that I was going to be sad and that I was going to be harassed, that I'd be discriminated against. And it's like, it's not. There's so much celebration out there, and there's so much community out there, and so many incredible things to do. So I think students really need to know that there's an amazing community out there.
I've never heard that point brought up. What a brilliant point. We do talk about Trans Day of Remembrance. There is Trans Day of Inclusion, but that's a brilliant point and a really and a you know, it's a sad day. Stacia, care to add?
Yeah, I think just this whole idea of being part of community as well and being accepted for who you are. I mean, that's really like where I focus on. I mean, our school has the word community in it, the name. So I want all of my students, including my TUSL LGBTQI students, to feel that they are part of something, and that they have the support of that community and the belief, and that they are an important member of that community. And it's, you know, can be such a confusing time for anybody in high school. God knows it was for me, for a lot of people, and especially, you know, students who are trying to figure out their own identity at so many levels. So I really think that, you know, and I've worked with parents who are very affirming, who are very supportive, but this transition is, you know, it's big, and it's, there's no timeline to it as well. So you want to just make sure that at least I try to ensure that the student feels they are part of something and they're an important member of the community.
There is that strength in numbers. There's a, you know, when I didn't know I was coming out, there certainly wasn't Ellen show. There wasn't any of that. And I would just say to my mom, "Hey mom, did you watch Oprah today?" Because back in the 80s, it would be like National Coming Out Day. And that was my way of like, "Did you watch Oprah?" So I'm like 2 degrees of separation. Like, I'm not really saying anything, but just wondering how you feel about that show topic. Now there's a question, and I think you might have answered it, but I want to mention it because other folks might be thinking about it. It was mainly directed, I think, to you, Jordan, but we can all answer it. One of our viewers has said, "Do you use the name Gay Straight Alliance or Gender Spectrum Alliance," also standing for GSA? Any other names for clubs? I teach in a middle school, and often we're discussing gender, but not always sexuality. So Jordan, do you want to take that one?
That's such a great question. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it is.
I know at my former school we were using the term Gay Straight Alliance, but at the school I'm at now, we've used the term ERGSA, which stands for Equal Rights, Gender and Sexuality Alliance. And I find it's much more inclusive, and it's a great term. So ERGSA is the one we use, but there's probably other ones out there as well.
And you can, and folks that are asking these questions means that they're thinking about it and they work in schools, and that's great. So egal.ca has resources. Jordan, maybe we can sort of reach out afterwards to these folks to have that conversation. I don't really think, I mean, I don't know if it matters what you call it, as long as you have something and you reach a consensus. ERGSA, thank you very much, Jordan, for adding that. Anything, it was directed to Jordan, but any sort of work experience with how that works for you, Lindsay and Stacia, in the schools that you're in or have been in?
Yeah, I mean, I know also I taught in BC, and it's becoming more common for them to use the acronym SOGI for sexual orientation, gender identity. And they also have some really cool resources like on this website called SOGI123, which I can put in the chat as well. So I've heard different clubs, like, but I think it depends on the school and the environment, because some people focus on leadership. I think some people focus on different language because maybe they're more familiar, but it's kind of cool when the students and the kids get to decide on the name too. I love that. They're like Rainbow Club. It's the Rainbow Club.
I love that too. I just want the baked goods. I've seen Social Justice Club. That was from Jack. Dennis and Jack, our moderators, are putting SOGI in there. Lindsay, so I know you said you offered to put it in there, but in our chat, we're pretty active in there. Finally, Stacia, do you have anything resembling that in the school you work in now?
Yeah, we do. We have a GSA. I think it's probably more attended by straight students, just really kind of to show their support. So it's an ongoing thing. Definitely. I'd like it to have more of a presence, but we're starting, we're building.
That's fantastic. It's good to know it's out there. And maybe folks don't even know what they are, just because, again, these acronyms are rolling off our tongues, but we're dealing with folks that are 14 to 21. If they don't know what they don't know, we don't know what we don't know, but they don't know what they don't know. So sort of putting those posters up, which we'll get to, Jordan, and sort of flagging affirming adult positions. All right, we have one more message. Let me just read. Oh, people are just loving you, Jordan. Okay, so which is great. There is another Q&A here. I'm going to go ahead and take this now because it might be in this moment instead of covering at the end, if that's okay. So if you do want to write a question in, I won't read your name so it can remain anonymous, but they say, while we stress that we are creating a safe space for all, there are students who hold strong beliefs against homosexuality for various reasons. How do we reconcile with these beliefs? These students push back saying that I was really not accepting everyone if I'm not accepting their beliefs. I struggle with this, and I would appreciate any responses. I'm going to tell you, before we all answer this personally and professionally, we are going to talk about going back to in-class learning. So these are some things that folks are going to be taking into their classroom. Jordan, you got off the hop there. We'll let you answer first.
Sure.
And I'm just going to take a breath because that's apparently a little triggering for me.
Yeah, I've heard this come up a lot. And I think the best response that I can come up with is that everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But if we start putting people down or saying that it's not okay for somebody to be either trans or queer or celebrate their religion or be who they are, then that's actually goes against human rights. So, because I had one student who said, what if your religion doesn't allow you to be queer or doesn't think that it's okay to be trans or gay? And I said, well, that if somebody is saying that's your religion and that you're not, that just the same thing again, that if that's a belief, you can have that belief in your head, but as soon as you speak that goes against human rights and that becomes discrimination. So, and as soon as I told her that, this student, she was Muslim, and she actually started joining all the things that the GSA was doing at the time and started advocating for all gender washrooms for students. And she was like, oh, okay, I guess it's okay for me to be an ally then. And it's almost like I gave her permission to be an ally. And really changed her year for her. It should be, yeah.
That's phenomenal. That is sort of the bottom line. It's lovely to say that everyone's entitled to their opinion, because they are, and we sometimes don't know how people are feeling until some of those homophobic, transphobic, bigoted things come out of their mouths. But the moment it infringes on the human rights code, it becomes, are they really entitled to that? And what comes after that, which is potentially physical or mental bullying, cyberbullying. Lindsay and Stacia, anything about that? Is a conundrum when you're in that space with a student.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a tricky circumstance, and it's definitely one that I've been in as well. And I love sort of Jordan's strategy of really emphasizing the difference between, like, okay, yep, you can have an opinion, but this is kind of what happens when that translates into action. And these are the ways that sort of, can negatively impact other people. I think another strategy I've used, which I think is really helpful when having any conversations around gender and sexuality, because they seem quite controversial in the space of schools, is really thinking about emotions and what's coming up in people's bodies and trying to pinpoint why that is. So, I think that, like, we all had, I think, could be wrong, but I anticipated that many of us, panelists included, Deb, you acknowledged that as well. We had a sort of embodied reaction where I definitely felt like, oh, I don't like it when I get asked this question. Like, oh, I know it's tough, how do we hold that, right? And we're human beings, so we are going to have reactions. And there's also people on the other side, and we've all been socialized in different ways. But I think part of the work of educating is making people realize, what are the elements of our socialization that we are going to hold on to, and what are the elements that we're going to rewrite, and what part of that socialization is for, the freedom and rights of the people around us, and what is actually harmful. And so those are the sorts of conversations I like to have with people, to gently plant seeds and to gauge their capacity to emotionally engage. Because if you come at them and you shut them down in certain ways, it can really create more resistance, because they then think that you're judging them or you're criticizing them for things that they have been brought up to believe. And there's other strategies that you can take. So yeah, those are just some techniques that I usually try to use.
Thanks, Lindsay. And Stacia?
Yeah, I think what's being, certainly coming from a religious school, and there's a lot of opportunity for dialogue because of all the different interpretations of, from the religion itself. What I have found, and like I said, this is like a traditional learning environment, so there's a lot of orthodox views, is that I'm finding with students, they're starting to, I think, their own awareness, and I'm talking straight students as well, is that, what they've learned about, what lives matter. I mean, whatever it is, if it's Black lives, if it's 2S LGBTQI lives, it's prompting dialogue, and the students are pushing for it. They're pushing for more dialogue about at the heart of everybody, the importance is the human themselves. And opinions, I think, Jordan, you just hit it on the head. You can have them in your head, but once they're shared, what I'm finding is that sharing, whether it's favorable, not favorable, it is starting a really important dialogue in my school. And I know it's not an easy dialogue, and I think we're learning as we go, but at the end of it there is a dialogue, and that conversation, I'm so pleased to see, even in the past few years, is starting to take place more and more. Despite how uncomfortable it may make us feel, at least it's happening. And in years, I've been at the school for 20 years, and there was never any discussion. It was like somebody would say something and that was it. And nobody would say a word because it came from scripture or something like that. That is changing. And now students are speaking up, staff are speaking up, and the dialogue is incredible. And the school environment and the community and the whole attitude is changing because of just an increased awareness and an increased interest. And yeah, so I mean, it is definitely uncomfortable. I felt the same way you did, Lindsay, when Deb asked that question, because it happens in my school, but I'm starting to see change, and the change is in the discussion about how we need to talk about this. We need to make sure that everybody feels part of the community, and part of that is being open about the dialogue.
Thank you so much. These are great questions. We do have another question that's rolled in. We're going to save it till the end. So we were just over the halfway mark. We have set aside 15 minutes at the end. So the attendee that wrote about disclosure, we're going to read that at the end, if that's okay. We're going to cover it back. We're going to, as my therapist would say, we're going to circle back to that. All right. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about COVID-19. And as vaccinations increase and the world opens up and students are going to be heading back to in-person learning, I know Ontario is going to be reopening in-class learning in September. Something that came up recently before I'll ask you a question is, I was a camp counselor online for Camp Rainbow Phoenix. And so they brought art galleries in and they encouraged folks to do art and everything. And I was in charge of cabin time. And so I had these 14 to 16-year-old delightful little humans who were so awkwardly delicious. It was fantastic. I loved every second of it. And after becoming an affirming adult in a safer space, on the third of 3 days of cabin time, we got really into it, right? And so I did pose the question, what was sort of the double-edged sword of being at home, learning, as opposed to in-school learning? Are you excited to go back? Are there trepidations about going back to in-person learning? And without fail, all 7 of these little humans said, I'm terrified to be dealing again with the straight boys in my school. Every single one, regardless of how they identified on the spectrum. Every single one. So just a bit of a circle moment for that, my belief system, or I don't believe in homosexuality or whatever. Those things are really, really real for those people walking through the halls of your schools, whether they share it with you or not. So talking about going back to in-person learning for members of the 2S LGBTQI communities, do we think, or do you think that it's been a hindrance or a help to be online, firstly? And secondly, how can we put supports in place immediately for these people coming back to in-person learning? It brings up lots of things. Was it a safer space at school? Was it a safer space at home? Was there a coming out process that was thwarted? Was there a transition process that through medical halts has been paused? So however you choose to hear that question and answer it, COVID-19 and going back to in-person learning, Lindsay, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because, again, it could have been, safer in some ways for students who were at home, or it could be the complete opposite. But I think I really resonated with what you said about that fear of, straight, and I would add probably cis boys. And again, hearkening to the sort of like socialization. So I feel like there's the long-term answer, and then maybe there's the short-term answer. I feel like the long-term is that we really need to be thinking about ways where we are not just focusing reactively on how to stop homophobia and transphobia in terms of like anti-bullying, but also doing this deep educational work with people who are privileged and looking at masculinity, looking at cis heteronormativity and how that connects with patriarchy. And that's really deep learning. And that's something that's largely absent from K-12 schools. So that's like the long term, what I would love to see happening in schools and in the curriculum. I think short term, coming back into spaces is again having people that are thinking about those transitions and maybe thinking about tricky points of entry for students in different places, and how there are different zones that students are more susceptible to violence, like washrooms, also thinking about administrative things like forms, thinking about new ways that we can check in with students about how they want to be referred, about who knows what information. But yeah, I always wrestle with this question because, my dream is that we don't always just have to be thinking about safety. But sadly, that's what a lot of these conversations are about.
Thanks, Lindsay. We got some feedback. I love what Lindsay is saying about these proactive anti-bullying strategies for learning. That's great feedback. Thank you. Jordan, something to think about as folks are coming back from potentially online to in-person learning. What can we do as affirming adults?
Sure. I agree entirely with what Lindsay is saying, and just to add to that and touch on what you were bringing up, Deb, because I think there are students who it might have been safer for them online, or they may have been more successful or found community online. And for others, it would have been very challenging. And so coming back to school might be a relief. But I think we really have to think about the impacts of the pandemic and the political climate as well on students who may already be struggling, and things. It might be very overwhelming to those who are already experiencing transphobia or homophobia, or for those with intersecting identities who may also be experiencing racism simultaneously. And the increased anxiety and the stress and that lost connection with supports for some people if they were part of a GSA, and then coming back, and there might be anxiety just seeing people again or being around people and when they've been isolated for so long. Asian racism that students were facing or may have faced during the pandemic, and the impact of Black Lives Matter and what they're seeing in the media and how that's affecting them. So what's been happening here and around the world, and then the need out of all of this, the need for queer positive social workers, therapists, affirming adults, inclusive curriculum, books in our libraries that they can celebrate who they are, role models on the walls. Like all this stuff is really crucially important at this time. But I think it's also like, I'm trying to think of all the different scenarios and all the different students who are out there and what they might be facing. And I think it's really important that we check in with them and just say, hey, how are you doing and what do you need? And it could be a class discussion, but it could be as well. One of you was talking about surveys that we gave to them anonymously. Like maybe that would be a really great thing to start the year off and say, we want to know how you're doing and what supports you need, because we know some of the things, but we need to know more and what specifically. And ask them specific questions to help get to that information of what they need. And just making sure that when day one, we're giving out pronouns and we're doing that during introductions on emails, on Zoom, and when we meet them, so that they know that it is a safer space and that they can be brave if they choose to be. I think that's really important as a trans guy. I really love when people put their pronouns on Zoom, or when they introduce themselves to me. If they're a cisgender person, they say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and these are my pronouns. And that makes me feel safer to share mine and more comfortable. So yeah, a few things.
That's wonderful. I'm loving that. I'm really loving everything about this conversation. Stacia, as folks are coming back, I'm sure that you're going to be standing room only for folks processing some stuff they're going through.
Well, I just came off, Deb, I just spent a month at a sleepaway camp up in Halliburton, and I was already starting to see kind of the effects of COVID and kids reintegrating into a community setting. And yeah, there are struggles. There are struggles across the board with mental health issues. and just kind of reintegrating into that social environment. So we are definitely anticipating that, kids are going to have to get reacquainted with living, or at least learning in a community environment after being isolated for so long, just as it was, in camp. So for us, we're really focusing on making sure our staff kind of are aware. They are the eyes and the ears in the classroom. And certainly for all of our students, we want the staff to recognize the importance of kind of understanding the stress of returning to this environment after a year and a half of being on a screen. And certainly for 2S LGBTQI community, even more so. But I think it's a real universal concern, to be honest with you. I'm concerned. A lot of my team is as well. And I think we just kind of have to have, I know this sounds maybe kind of corny, but our spidey senses even in tune that much more, and keeping an eye out and ensuring that our students know that it's okay not to be okay. That's a saying that, I often use, and that there are supports and there are resources for all of our students as they, get used to whatever the new norm is. I know everybody uses such a cliche saying, but certainly for our students who are part of the 2S LGBTQI community as well. So we're really focusing, like the school is dedicated resources to ensuring that the staff are more aware and more educated on mental health issues for students as a whole, but also for our students who might be transitioning or however they're identifying. So, and again, that continued dialogue is so important. So I think that that's where we're looking at, and certainly as a starting point when we come back for the new school year.
Thank you. I know a few of the attendees are equity and inclusion officers with a school board. So I know they're listening to all this now, and I do want to talk about curriculum and how things are working, how things might not be working. And do teachers have autonomy in their classroom, or do they have to go there through their VP or their principal to be able to do things on their own? I know, being that my son comes from a rainbow family, I wasn't waiting for folks to do something. So I would bring in Mummy, Mama, and me, and Heather has two mummies, and I would bring all these inclusive books in when he started daycare at 9 months old. I still do it with his library, and I'm proud to say that instead of waiting for something to happen, my covert op was to be part of the parent council. So I was kind of making change from within, and I saw beautiful changes in the school staff, where I went from one of the folks that works in the school being sort of to now he's like very proudly putting a rainbow flag in his background during our parent council meeting, and is very excited to tell me that they're flying a pride flag. And I'm like, yes, should I have to do that? No, but am I okay to do it? Yes. But I kind of want it to just be across the board. So as far as curriculum, it is amazing. Thank you. And somebody says, agreed, Stacia, it's okay to not be okay, and talking about coping strategies that'll be different for all students. And someone even says there's, outside of 2S LGBTQI and everyone, there's the fear of, sort of a fourth wave. So there's a lot of pressure on kids' shoulders for sure. We've got about 10 more minutes before we hop into the Q&A, and we do have a few pending questions. So I'll end with this: the classroom setting and curriculum, given that we sort of have different experiences, what's working, what isn't working, and if there are decision makers as part of this panel in the attendees section, what changes need to occur to ensure that we're stepping up to our commitments as affirming adults. It's a long-winded question, but I hope you got the gist of that there. Lindsay, first.
Yeah, I love that question, but it's also such a big one, and it's like so many things that I'd want to say. I think that in a lot of ways, some curriculum is open-ended enough that it can be interpreted in different ways that educators can bring in and infuse 2S LGBTQIA perspectives. The issue is that a lot of educators don't have that lens, and they don't actually have the education or the kind of queer and trans literacy themselves, because they've been systematically denied an education on it. So there's this gap in terms of, if they don't feel confident or knowledgeable, they're not going to bring that lens to the curriculum when they come to it. And they're not going to say, why don't I use this text, this book? Why don't I offer examples in my math course of two fathers, or someone who's intersex? Why don't I bring that into my biology class? Or so I think what really needs to happen is there needs to be a commitment in like teacher education programs to have gender and sexuality courses, where we're building capacity again proactively for educators to have a sort of mandatory expected level of education, so that the students and the families and community members who are part of the community don't have all of this weight on our shoulders to be doing the education work and the advocacy work. So that's one element. And then I also do think that there should just be more explicit mention of gender and sexuality in the curriculum. If you go through, say, the Ontario curriculum, there's very little. It's like relegated to maybe like health in a lot of ways, or you'll have examples of like, maybe you could talk about gender, but it's more, I think it's more in relation to like women rights and history or different things like that. So there's a lot of room in the curriculum in ways to just bring that in more, to say to people, listen, you got to do this. This is actually part of your job and it's your responsibility. This isn't a choice. It's actually your job as an educator to be ensuring that, to us LGBTQ people see themselves represented in schools.
I'm letting that sink in because I formed that question around our pre-interview chat, Lindsay, for you, knowing that it would resonate with the other folks too. But you brought up curriculum, and I would be remiss if we didn't, as educators and organizations and school employees. Jordan, I'm sure you have a few ideas on this subject.
Yeah, for sure. I agree what you're saying, Lindsay. And I also, I wanted to also circle back to something that we were talking about earlier about kids being afraid of going back to school with cisgender boys, and just the fact that a lot of learning needs to be done around who can be a feminist. And as a trans guy, I can be a feminist. And for cisgender boys, they can be feminists. And so that learning needs to happen. And all this learning needs to happen with staff so that they're more knowledgeable about queer content and feel more comfortable inserting it into the curriculum. And it also makes me think of the health curriculum that was taken away by the government, the new curriculum that was put in place and then said, oh no, we're not going to do that anymore. And it was taken away. And then there's this fear from staff of, oh, are we allowed to teach about transgender people? Are we allowed to talk about non-binary? And oh, that has to happen at this exact age. And it's like, well, no, we have trans kids who are in kindergarten. We have kindergarten kids who have trans parents, or a trans uncle, or a non-binary aunt. And so, and maybe they don't go by the term aunt, maybe they go by a different term. I'm not sure what that is yet. I think we need new language. So knowing that these are our communities, we need to be talking about this from kindergarten all the way up to high school until they graduate. Because that's how homophobia and transphobia happens, is by not talking about it. And like, that's what happened to us when we were kids, is nobody talked about it. And the only time it was spoken about, it was in a homophobic or transphobic way, and it was a put down. And that's the huge problem in society. So I really do think that, I think it's amazing that everyone came here and came to share and learn and ask questions. And I think the more that we do that and have these conversations, the more that people will feel more confident to insert into the curriculum and do that in all subject areas, because it's not just for language, it's not just for health, it's for every subject. And it, as Lindsay was saying, it's a responsibility for all staff members to be doing this. It's a human right. And learning can't happen until we do that for our students and make sure that they feel comfortable and they see themselves in the curriculum. Then they're going to be more engaged. If you see students who are not engaged, it's because they don't feel like they're welcome. So, yeah.
Yeah, that you're not speaking to them, their lived experience, who they are, what resonates with them.
Exactly.
Thanks, Jordan. Thank you.
Sure.
Stacia, what can you potentially suggest for resources for yourself or supports that you might need outward as a guidance counselor for folks coming to you for help?
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky. We have an incredible relationship with Youth, Family, and Child Services. They're an amazing resource when it comes to how we better support our 2S LGBTQI students. But I agree with Lindsay. I mean, so much of it is the education and knowledge of our own educators. And I can tell you at our school, we're just chipping like a little tiny chip at the beginning of opening the minds of our staff and introducing them to what the 2S LGBTQI community needs from our school, from our teachers. It's like really, like I said, I think we're a little bit behind, to be honest with you. But I'm starting to see an openness of our school administration to bring more information and more education to our staff. It started last year, and I know it's going to continue into this year because it's not something that we can ignore. It's not something we can push under a rug. It is something that we need to acknowledge. And I think that certainly I'm starting to see this with my school. It's a long time coming, to be honest with you. So I'm hoping this year we'll start to see increased education. As far as I'm concerned, that's what I'm pushing for. And that's what I'd like to work with our administration on. Yeah, I mean, you asked that question. I'm like, curriculum? What curriculum? There's no curriculum. And there's not even in the general studies that comes that, we take right from the province. So we're trying to change that. But nothing, changes quickly in any school.
Well, and I suspect that with you in this position, working in allyship, that the needle is moving faster than it would if you weren't there. So
I hope so.
I'm sure it is. I have every confidence. I'm just going back into the chat for a second. I just don't want to forget some folks that are educators. I'll go back a little bit. Lindsay, the lack of knowledge is real. I have found these EGAL webinars so excellent for my learning, so I can bring the content into my school. We do have that, again, egal.ca if you want to check things out. And then Jack, our moderator, responded to them. And one person says, if we expect risk taking and research from our students, we absolutely need to learn, question, and ensure that we are ultra aware of our audience. In other words, modeling. Love the role modeling approach. So that sort of brings us to the end of the structured questions and answers of myself that I created. I hope they were succinct and help folks. We've only had a few people dropping off. Stay with us because you're going to get a survey, and we want to do well. We have a few questions and answers here. While I pull them up, it made me think about Paula, who I introduced to you, is going to be facilitating our 2 French panels. The entire French language is binary. That's going to be one of the questions I'm including, Paula, for your panelists, because for sure they've thought about some workarounds for, you think it's, non-binary ant or teta or whatever you want to maybe refer. The entire French language is binary, male and female. So that's something, Paula, that I'm going to have to talk to you about for sure for your panels coming up next Friday at noon and 7. Okay, the Q&A portion here. Somebody writes in, when it comes to disclosure, thank you very much for these questions, by the way, there's 3 of them. We're going to get to all of them if that's okay. When it comes to disclosure, how do you work with an admin team who will only work with students by outing them to their parents and guardians? I didn't pre-read this. I have used data from every class in every school, end quote. Super pumped for the new data. to discuss how detrimental it is when we don't allow for safe spaces for students and to support them on their journey and not force them on their journey, but to no avail. I recognize these admins are on their own journey, but how do we support them in understanding that they need to be affirming and not denying or negating the courage our students have and the journey our students are on? Jordan, you are probably working closest to your administrators in a school setting. Please answer this for our viewer.
Yeah, sure. I think just informing administrators that they should not be outing students ever, that's not their story to tell, and that they can self-identify for themselves, but they can't self-identify for somebody else. It's a safety concern. And I think if there are admin out there who lack the knowledge, then I would point them in the direction of EGAL for workshops, and make sure that they get the learning and understand the stats that are out there, because there are a large majority, I think it's, I forget what the stat is, but ages 10 to 15, there's a huge number of suicides due to lack of acceptance out there. And homeless, like if we look at homeless youth, the reason for that is because if there isn't acceptance at home, then kids start couch hopping from one friend to another, and eventually they can't do that anymore. They end up on the streets. So admin really need to be aware that not every family is accepting, unfortunately. And some people might come from a place where it's illegal to be queer, and so they have the same beliefs, or they've been brought up with that. You know, my mom grew up here, but her belief, what she was taught all her life was that you're going to hell if you're part of the queer community. And so she didn't realize that it's okay to be queer. And we have to be very careful when we have personal information about students. And I would suggest if definitely send them to a gal, but if you have an administrator who, if you want to send them my way, please feel free to share my email, and I'd be happy to talk to them about the dangers of outing students and some of the things that could happen, and that they're not doing anyone a favor by doing that. That, you know, if they've asked and they said it's okay, that's fine. But if you don't have somebody's consent, we should be talking about consent. And this is a huge area of consent, is making sure that you have somebody's permission before sharing their information.
And we have admins on here right now, I'm sure of it, that might not have known, you know, that they were, you know, their intention could have been one thing, and they only knew what they knew, and that was their pattern of established administration. And now moving forward, they will do differently, I hope and assume. So we did, one of our moderators, thank you very much. Still in every class is one of our awareness campaigns on EGAL. And there's some data in there that could be really helpful in advocacy work in your school. So take a look at that. I think this is being recorded, and we are going to be posting it again. And unless I'm mistaken, I think the comments stay in, I think the chat stays in, but either way, we'll attach some resources to that. Okay, 10 minutes left, 2 more questions, unless there's something really pressing for Lindsay and Stacia to answer that particular question. No? Okay, I thought it was pretty well directed to Jordan, because you're listening to those admins from your office, right? So, okay, so an anonymous attendee says, creating safe spaces are difficult as the idea of safety, quote unquote, varies from person to person. Therefore, I always try to advocate for brave spaces. For me, brave spaces leave room for individuals to ask questions and learn from one another. To the speakers, how would you describe a brave space? Why are brave spaces important? And is one more important than the other? Brave versus safe spaces. Lindsay or Stacia, do you want to take that?
Sure, I can take that one. Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's great to distinguish between those two things. I think for me, brave spaces are really about having courageous conversations, which means having disruptive and uncomfortable conversations at times. And that requires doing work that's probably going to bring up difficult or challenging emotions, which means that it's great to have someone who has the capacity to facilitate that sort of emotional level of learning, which hopefully all educators have, but sometimes when we're not in tune with things, we might not know how to deal with when things come up. And I feel that that's, that is different from safe spaces, because a lot of people would say, I don't feel safe. You're asking me to think about things. You're asking me to reflect on privilege right now, or to reflect on norms. You're asking me to think of certain things, ways that I've been, brought up to believe. I think that, safe spaces and brave spaces both have a place, but I think that safety can sometimes be weaponized and actually used against to us LGBTQ people as a way to say we're not going to have difficult conversations that challenge norms, or we're going to prioritize the emotional safety of people who are not experiencing oppression, and that's not okay. So we can consider the safety, I think, of, gender and sexually creative folks, and that's really important, but we also need to privilege having difficult conversations and doing that in ways that think about the emotions, both of the people that are part of marginalized groups, and also creating space for emotions that come up for people who are part of dominant groups too.
Thank you, Lindsay. Stacia, anything to add to that? I love that Lindsay's coming to us from Treehouse today, and that bird had a lot to say in the background. I was really loving the dulcet tones of that cardinal in the background. They're like, yes. Stacia, anything, do you want to talk about the differences potentially between brave spaces and safe spaces?
It's, yeah, it's kind of, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think. I was distracted by the birds.
I know, they were really with us. They were really bringing it home right at the end.
No,
like, the sun's going down.
It's amazing. I mean, I think to have the brave conversations, there has to be a lot of trust involved too. And I think, like I said this earlier on in the evening, is that I think when you have trusting relationships with your students, that allows, it's a great foundation to have those brave conversations. So I mean, it's certainly something I'm very mindful of. I always try to, allow for a safe space. That's hands down, like definitely something, but then you build on that to get to those brave spaces and those brave conversations and those challenging conversations. So that for me is it's like you kind of build. It's I think you start one place and then you build to the brave space. So
thank you. So we've got a final question here from an attendee, and then we're going to get to final thoughts and wrap up in about 5 minutes on time, which is phenomenal. So one of the attendees says, there's a few question marks in this, so we'll get to, I think I want everyone's answer on this, if I could. Do you have any advice to take what Lindsay is saying and making it happen in our current schools? I'm a new leader, still finding my footing, but I am also the only queer identified adult in my school and have a great passion for being an affirming adult role model for the 2S LGBTQI youth. However, I struggle with balancing between pushing a more inclusive and affirming environment without stepping on more established educators' toes. Because they mentioned your name, Lindsay, you're going first.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I also really resonate with this comment too, because that was so me, as a new teacher coming in being like, yeah, I'm gonna start all GSAs and like put up all the posters and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, this is not exactly the environment I thought it was gonna be. And I think there can be a disconnect sometimes between what we hope we can do and then what seems possible within the constraints of different curriculum that we have to get out there and different forms of assessment that we're supposed to do. But I think in terms of making it happen, I think there's a lot, and again, I said a lot, so I think like the structural things, I wish I had the answers, but I think that's going to take commitments from leaders who can make certain courses mandatory. I think everyday things that we can do is that just like stand in your truth and know that there are ways that you can walk your own path. You can bring things into your classroom, and you can also do a lot of gentle modeling. And I'm going to harken back to what I think all of us, Stacia and Jordan and I, have been talking about, which is building trusting relationships, making spaces where, people want to be invited in and they want to learn, because people can become very defensive when they think that you're criticizing them. I think it's just human nature. But when you have more of a relationship with someone, they want to seem good in your eyes, and they're more open to learning. So just because, maybe you're starting off, you bring so much insight, and I love the passion that you have, and I love that you're here. So just keep doing that, and just know that it can't all happen right away, but you're planting seeds, and build community and connection wherever you are, and find networks and keep doing that. And if you want to connect with me, I will cheer you on from afar.
Thank you so much. And some of the takeaway of this being an affirming adult in any environment, we're talking about youth 14 to 21 in the 2S LGBTQI communities, but of course we've all talked about BIPOC folks and being affirming to those safer spaces as well. I think leading with love is the best vibration, and if you start with that, folks will entrust that you're a safer space and an affirming adult in general. So Jordan has shared some great resources. Thank you, Jordan. You're a plethora of information. You've shared a great resource for challenging homophobia and heterosexism from K to 12 curriculum. It's a resource guide. We will absolutely continue to compile these and share them with the registrants after the session. So don't worry about jotting it down or copying and pasting it into another Word document. Stay with us for the next 2 minutes. Thank you very much to all of our panelists today. It has been tonight. It has been exceptional to talk to you, and I have such a fire in my belly. I know that part of me wants to sleep really well tonight, and part of me is going to be like, yeah, how do I get that? And how do I come in as a visitor to Stacia's school and wear my big gay pride flag? And yeah, I'm coming. So I want to respectfully, I'm going to give you all a minute to wrap up, please. I want to thank you for your time. And again, we'll start with Lindsay. Just a minute to wrap up would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I love that we're having these conversations. I love that I'm hearing about Jordan and Stacia's work. And thank you so much, Deb, for bringing us together, and Jack and Dennis for doing the behind the scenes stuff. And lovely to meet you, Paula.
Thanks, Lindsay. Jordan, final words?
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to reiterate what Lindsay was saying. I'm just feel really honored to be here, and thanks, Deb, for moderating, and great to be on here with you and Lindsay and Stacia and Paula. It's great to have you here, and Jack and Dennis, thanks again as well. And it's great the work that you're doing, and safe spaces is definitely our goal, but we have to start with braver spaces to have these conversations, have courageous conversations. And I think if we start an equity team, start an ERGSA at our school, and it'll just build. It starts with one student, starts with one staff member or one parent coming in, as Deb was doing at their school. So it only takes one person, and eventually you have a whole community of allies. And so yeah, thanks for doing this. Thanks for being here.
It was a beautiful full circle moment. And now I'm thinking about that first student that was in at the GSA, and it was just you and them. Yeah. And then you built it and they came with the baked goods also. Stacia, last words.
I just actually wanted to comment on the last question that Lindsay had addressed, is don't give up. Don't give up. And because I know even trying to do programs in my own school, you might get sidetracked, or somebody says, no, not quite that. Don't give up. And stick to your convictions and your beliefs, because it's worth it. But thanks to everybody. Deb, thanks for the invite to be part of this amazing panel. Jordan, Lindsay, it was incredible to learn from you tonight, and to also, learn from the questions that were asked by our guests. And great work, everybody, and continue to do the wonderful things that you're doing. So thank you so much for allowing me to be part of tonight's program.
Thank you, and continue to make the change that you're inch by inch chipping away. I had a visual of you. I'm going to bring you a chisel to make those changes. Just finally, a few accolades and thank yous from attendees. This was amazing. Thank you so much to everyone. Someone else says, thank you to the whole panel, an excellent evening. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I think that's a great note to leave on. Thank you very much to our panelists again. Thank you very much to the attendees. We only had a few folks drop off and life happens. I know I've got to get my kiddo to bed. He's staying up a little later than usual and loving it right now. So thank you very much to everybody. I'll invite the panelists to stick around for another couple of moments. I said it before, and I'm just going to say, if you lead with love, only good things can happen. Thank you very much. Have a great and safe night. Thanks for attending, everybody. Thank you.